What are the positives with stablecoins and what are the concerns that we should have, if any?
We can hate on stablecoins, but I think that hate is sort of a first world perspective because you probably have a bank account, right, Eric?
Yes.
So you're kind of speaking about this topic from a position of power and luxury where a lot of people just don't have a bank account, but they want dollars. So what do you do in that case?
You can't just flip off a light switch and turn the dollar off and turn a Bitcoin standard on. It would be absolute mayhem.
I think it's actually going to be a quick transition because
do you think that Bitcoin extends the life of the dollar, or do you think it's going to bring the dollar to an end quicker?
it does feel like Bitcoin is extending it by integrating with it. I think when things get bad enough, every card is on the table. Some of those cards are bad cards. It's the rolling out of a CBDC like in Europe, starting to control the internet like in the UK. And that's why I say plan accordingly.
Is it possible that the United States government is acquiring Bitcoin quietly?
I don't think it's possible. It's hard for any government to do stuff in secret. Well, things that are beneficial for the country, it's hard for them to do it in secret.
All right, Samson Mow. It's an honor to be here and have this conversation with you. How are you doing today?
Great to be here with you, Eric.
Yes, well, thank you. And so I want to start this out with a tweet that you just put up the other day in response to Brian Armstrong. Brian Armstrong says, if you don't believe me or don't get it, I don't have time to try to convince you. Sorry. Satoshi wrote that 15 years ago today. It took some time, but there are hundreds of millions of people that get it now. And your reply was, in the immortal words of Kurt Cobain, he's the one who likes all our pretty songs. He likes to sing along. He likes to shoot his gun, but he knows not what it means. Knows not what it means. Tell me about that. I'd love that, by the way.
Well, it just means that Brian doesn't get it. Like he's quoting Satoshi scripture without understanding it whatsoever. And if you're following Brian's talking points lately on media and X, he's becoming a bit more maximalist, right? And he's talking about Bitcoin being, the best asset to be created ever. And you can't really do that while you're peddling fart coin and other shit coins out there nonstop, or even worse, advocating for Ethereum and talking about how great Ethereum is. It doesn't work together. And I just think he misses that completely. And I saw people responding to his Satoshi quote and saying, like, you're the one that doesn't get it. And I kind of agree. I mean, if he got it, he wouldn't have been in the place he was during the Blocksize War, trying to co-opt Bitcoin, leading the charge of companies trying to control and corrupt it, and saying things like, Bitcoin clients are like block explorers. You want lots of them competing. And when he says that, he means lots of different consensus rules at play in the marketplace, as if it was consensus compatible. I don't even know how that would work. But he's never really come to God and said, I messed up and I'm wrong on all of these things. And he's just kind of still promoting altcoins and talking about how great Bitcoin is. And I just don't think you can do both.
Yeah, I agree with that. I struggle immensely with Brian Armstrong. He seems to be clearly a prophet maxi. And it's funny you bring up Fartcoin. I feel like it was maybe 2 weeks ago. I get an email from Coinbase. Fartcoin is a top mover. And it's like maddening that he's promoting all that garbage. And I also think about him from time to time. I would imagine that he's saving in Bitcoin. He probably doesn't hold any Fartcoin. Yeah, so I'm curious, actually. I wasn't around during the Blocksize Wars, so I got in the end of 2017, maybe towards the end of all of that. Can you tell me about how that went down and what was your involvement in the Blocksize Wars for somebody who wasn't there?
So I was the COO at BTC China back then, or BTCC. It's a exchange and mining pool back in the day, one of the biggest. And because we were a large part of the mining hash rate, I think at our peak we're something like 18% of the network. The core devs, Gavin Andreessen and Mike Hearn, came to us and said, it's time to upgrade to Bitcoin XT. And that was kind of my first foray into Bitcoin development drama. But they had kind of split off from the rest of the Bitcoin core developers, and they were pushing their own fork. And they were presenting it as if it was an upgrade and this is the next thing you have to change to. And that's kind of what pushed me down the rabbit hole to figure out exactly what was going on and what it meant and how everything worked. So that kind of escalated, I guess, when more and more actors piled on, including Brian Armstrong, on the big block side. They were trying to change the protocol and co-opt it to have bigger blocks. And I think it was the beginning of a slippery slope if you could petition and change the Bitcoin protocol for your own goals and to your own ends, especially for corporations to do so. So I think it was an important thing. And the opposition was this small block camp, which were saying you can't just change consensus rules. You can tighten them, but you can't loosen them. And that if you change something like block size, it opens the door to changing the 21 million supply limit. And of course, the small blockers won because we were right, and also because Bitcoin is incredibly hard to change. So you had effectively every big company in the space pushing for this change. And at that time, maybe Bitcoiners today don't really appreciate it, but it was like everybody trying to force a change on Bitcoin. All the big companies, Coinbase, almost every exchange, almost every mining pool and mining company. So to put it into context of today, it'd be like Coinbase with Marathon, with BlackRock and everybody else saying, we're going to increase the Bitcoin limit to, 42 million now. And saying you have no say in the matter because you're just a pleb with a Bitcoin node.
Interesting. So yeah, I was curious as you were saying that, like, what would be the incentive for them to increase the block size? How would they be able to effectively, like, if they did double the supply of Bitcoin, would they be able to do so in a way where they're the recipients of the new coins and dilute other people? Like, what's the incentive to try to co-opt it, I suppose? Like, I still don't understand how that could work.
Well, it depends on how you view all the players back then, and we'll never know their true motivations. But as I said, it's a slippery slope. It's an innocuous change saying, okay, we need to scale Bitcoin. Fees are high, and we don't want fees to be high. We don't want people to pay 25 cents or a dollar per Bitcoin transaction. So what do we need to do? We need to make the blocks bigger so we can have cheaper transactions. It's like Ethereum and raising the gas limits and all that. I'm not that familiar with all the inner workings of Ethereum. I don't want to be, but it's similar to that. But that opens the door for more changes, more consensus level changes to the code, like increasing the supply. And I don't know if they wouldn't have direct access. They would still need to mine it. But given that a lot of them are dominant, especially like the mining side, you had Bitmain with a lot of their sub pools, their pool and sub pools, they would directly benefit if that change were to happen because they would get more coins. But I mean, at that point, Bitcoin becomes like an altcoin. It's just malleable, changeable at will, and unreliable, not immutable anymore. So I think another motivation could have been that Bitcoin is stagnating because back then you had all these alts and they have features. Adam likes to call them feature coins. Adam Back likes to call them feature coins, but they have some interesting feature. Like Ethereum is like programmable. That's their marketing speak. I mean, technically anything is programmable, but not everything is immutable and permissionless and decentralized. So I think there was a push to make Bitcoin more relevant in comparison to things like altcoins and Ethereum. And if you go back and look at it, after Brian Armstrong lost the war and he was kind of, mitigated, he went hardcore into Ethereum because that was what he wanted. He wanted something he could change all the time and be in control of and dictate a roadmap to and have this, it's high tech story backing him.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I'm also wondering, how did you come to the conclusion that the small block was better? Because it does seem logical, like, hey, we should scale this thing, we should increase the block size. I think Hal Finney made a post very early on saying that he thought we would end up having Bitcoin banks, and he kind of, I forget the specifics around the post, but he indicated an understanding that you would have this scale in layers. But during the block size wars, how did you come to that conclusion that the small block was the better way to go?
Well, actually, I would credit Adam back. So at the very start, I was a bit skeptical of Gavin and Mike Hearn, but I also thought maybe it is a good idea to increase the block size. So there is an interview where I think it's Bitcoin Magazine. I did say, yeah, it's good to have bigger blocks because the fees will be lower and it'll be better for Bitcoin's growth. But again, a lot of people fell into that trap. I think Wences too. He was a big blocker and he repented later on and acknowledged it. But I think back then the understanding of how Bitcoin worked was not as readily available and as prevalent as it is today. Like you can get all of these resources at your fingertip. But back then, there was not a lot of communication. There were not a lot of published sources out there about how these things work. We hadn't gone through the Blocksize War, so there was no Blocksize War book by Johnny Beer, and we were going through a learning process. So on the surface, it sounds logical, and I think a lot of people fell into that trap, myself included, at first, thinking, yeah, it's probably good that we increase adoption by lowering the fees. But when I spoke with Adam, I think we had a 3 hour conversation. He kind of went through all the intricacies of why it doesn't really work, because then you have to change all the time if you want to lower the fees. And also fees are a part of the system. It's how Bitcoin works. Like if Bitcoin becomes more valuable, it'll cost more to transact Bitcoin for a number of reasons. But the most important thing is like understanding that this is a consensus rule change and how consensus is enforced by the whole network. You can't arbitrarily change it. And by changing it, you would effectively create a fork and split into two coins. And that's kind of what happened with Bitcoin Cash or Bcash.
Yeah, as if something comes to mind that Saylor said, I've heard him say a few times. He's like, just don't change it. Can we just not change it? Let's keep it the way it is.
iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer, so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's iCointechnology.com/breedlove. If you're anything like me, you understand that Bitcoin is something we can use every day to connect, to collaborate, and to build stronger, freer communities. As true Bitcoiners, you all know we are each responsible for onboarding more Bitcoiners. That's why I chose to partner with Cowbolt, an expense splitting app that settles in Bitcoin. It can be as simple as splitting a dinner bill. Your friend covers dinner and you reimburse them, but you send it back to him in Bitcoin. Now your friend has their first sats, and as I always say, where your money goes, the mind follows. By using Cowbolt to get Bitcoin into the hands of your friends and family, you can help us orange pill the world. Cowbolt is built to let you split costs, share expenses, and settle instantly, while always keeping full control of your keys. Cowbolt is simple, social, non-custodial, exactly how Bitcoin was meant to be used. If you're serious about Bitcoin, it's time to act like it. Download Cowbolt today on iOS or Android. To learn more, go to cowbolt.com. Again, that's Cowbolt, COWBOLT.com.
And so on that note, in order for Bitcoin to scale, we have Lightning. You're working on Aqua. Do you think Lightning has a future? What are the challenges with Lightning, and what's the difference between Lightning and Aqua? I'm actually rather unfamiliar with that.
So Aqua is a liquid wallet at its base, but we support Lightning transactions by using atomic swaps through our partner Bolts. So when you receive Lightning into your Aqua wallet, it's auto swapped into liquid Bitcoin. And there's a number of reasons why that's beneficial, because to use Lightning, you actually have to maintain channels and backup channels, assuming you're using Lightning, you know, non-custodially. A lot of people use custodial Lightning wallets, and that's fine because it's easy to use and you can do really cheap transactions of sending one sat to somebody, which is cool.
Like
But
my Strike account, essentially.
well, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're using it, like running it yourself, you have to maintain the channels, back them up, open channels, maintain liquidity, and that's a lot of work. And it also impacts your ability to transact because you have to be able to route the right amount. You have to have enough liquidity in your channels in the direction you're trying to send to do that. And this is where it starts getting complicated and people start to glaze over their eyes. But Aqua abstracts all of that away because we swap to something stable like liquid Bitcoin and we swap out of liquid Bitcoin there. So there's no need to deal with liquidity. All of that complexity is offloaded to Bolts, which is kind of the swap provider for that. So it just makes Lightning work. And there's a small fee when you swap into liquid and a small fee when you swap out of liquid. But that's sort of mitigated because if you were to open channels and buy liquidity, like I think Phoenix Wallet sells you liquidity for 1%, then you're effectively paying for it anyways. And I think it took some time for people to understand that the model is basically, you pay up front in some of these other wallets, whereas with Aqua, you're paying a la carte. You're paying a small fee for every swap in and swap out of liquid to Lightning. But if you're doing bigger transactions, like you're paying for groceries, gas, or something like that, then it doesn't really matter because you can net it out and it's about the same as paying up front for opening up a $1,000 channel and paying a 1% fee versus paying, 10, 20 cents for a couple of big swap ins and swap outs.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Is Aqua open source like Lightning is? It's an open
Yeah,
source protocol?
it's open source. Like Aqua is a wallet, so it's built on Liquid. Liquid is open source. Aqua is open source. Liquid is a federated model, and it's about 60 or 70 companies now operating this network. So a lot of Bitcoin companies like Bull Bitcoin, Bitfinex, us, SideSwap, ton of others, and everyone's doing different things on Liquid. You have companies like Stoker doing tokenization on Liquid, tokenizing stocks like MicroStrategy and um, Capital B. So a lot of different things you can do on the Liquid sidechain, but our focus is using it for payments and using it in tandem with Lightning. But Lightning has a lot of problems in and of itself, not just the complexity that I outlined before, but also the fact that you have to tie up capital. So Lightning has evolved a bit, I think, from the original vision, which was everyone would run a Lightning node on top of their Bitcoin node, and everyone would open channels themselves, to more of something like an interop layer to many different things. Like we are a Liquid-based wallet, but you could have an eCash wallet. One that's popular? Cashew, and that's a Chaumian Mint, and that's connected over Lightning too. So you're swapping in from Lightning to the asset of the mint, and then you swap out again. But it's almost like Lightning connects everything. You can even connect to other side chains too, like not just Liquid, but another side chain. So it's evolved into this interoperability layer.
Interesting. I like that. And that was a great explanation. And I love building things on Bitcoin. The fact that that's happening, I think, is really important. My issue with altcoins, generally speaking, is the value proposition, in my humble opinion, is entirely flawed if it's not built on something that's immutable. it seems like all these altcoins are an extension of the broken fiat world that we have, you know. And one of my favorite quotes of yours is altcoins have natural sellers and Bitcoin has natural buyers. I really like that. And as far as, you know, Lightning and block size, I'm curious what your thoughts are on core versus knots and ordinals. Because personally, I think at times, like, I'm a free market maximalist. I think that you should be able to create and try to sell whatever you want. But then I'm a little conflicted internally because I think, like, wait, we have an opportunity to change the direction of our civilization. And it seems to be really important. Can we not draw monkeys or dick pics or whatever crazy shit that we are on the blockchain? And how does the ordinals affect the decentralized element? How many people can run a node? Do we have blockchain bloat issues? So yeah, what are your thoughts on ordinals and core versus knots?
Well, it's a complicated topic. I don't know. That's like an hour long or 2 hour conversation in and of itself. But I'm not a fan of ordinals. I mean, if you want to do ordinals, go for it. You can inscribe things on Bitcoin. Um, but you have to understand that the whole protocol is not a part of Bitcoin. It's some other client that's referencing and pointing to Bitcoin. And ordinals is not even new. I mean, it's sort of a copy of Counterparty, XCP. Like it's an old thing where you're kind of doing colored coins or tokens on Bitcoin, but it is a separate thing of it in and of itself. So I'm not a fan of ordinals. I don't believe in rare sats. I mean, you're just arbitrarily counting a number of a sat in a UTXO and tracking it through. But every time you create a new UTXO, you're actually destroying it. So you're just kind of tracking in your own head and saying this is that same sat through all these transactions, but it's not the same sat. So I guess that's where it all breaks down. But I mean, ordinals open up a bigger can of worms in that we've reached this sort of point in which we're arguing about spam on Bitcoin. And ordinarily, I would agree that you can't really spam Bitcoin. If as long as you're paying a fee, then it's a transaction. But it gets more complicated because Bitcoin Core has seemingly started removing roadblocks to spam. So this is where I started getting more vocal about it because they're removing things in the name of standardization and for pure logic. But there are psychological barriers. Like if you limit the op return, then you have to go out of band, and there are additional costs and risks to a miner to take these out of band transactions. And I don't think they're really factoring that in. They're only looking at things from a very academic lens of, can it be done? Okay, it can be done, therefore we should allow it. But I don't think that's the right mindset to deal with things like spam. Like there are natural things that have been built into Bitcoin to stymie and deny spam. And those things have just been eroded gradually, bit by bit, by the current Bitcoin Core developers. So I think Knots is a great alternative, and I think people should use Knots if they disagree with Bitcoin Core. The other alternative is, of course, to not upgrade to later Bitcoin Core versions and stick with, 2.9. But yeah, it's a very complex topic.
Yeah. Gosh, I have a lot of questions about that specifically, but we'll jump ahead for the sake of time.
We could do another pod later.
I know.
Just on all this.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I've thought a lot about it. I've had a couple good conversations, but I haven't had the opportunity to pick the brain of somebody like you on that one.
Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions.
I'm curious your comments on stable coins. The stablecoin thing seems to be kind of a contentious topic as well. People are concerned that that's the introduction of CBDCs. I think of Saylor talking about all currencies collapsing into the dollar, all properties collapsing into Bitcoin. If you're in Venezuela, access to a stablecoin is a good thing. What are the positives with stablecoins, and what are the concerns that we should have, if any?
Well, I think it's a bit of a hot topic. A lot of Bitcoiners don't like stablecoins. They're saying you should just be Bitcoin only. But I don't think that's a reality that we can just hope for and expect, because a lot of people in the world still are looking for dollar denominated value, like stablecoins, if not the US dollar, because in many places in the world, it's actually very hard to get dollars, either in your bank account or physical cash. And I think this is why people are turning to things like Tether. Tether's completing the last mile. They're reaching the people that want dollars, but can't get dollars necessarily. And I think it's simply a supply and demand thing. Like, in a perfect world, everyone would understand Bitcoin and everyone would just want Bitcoin, not today, but yesterday. Maybe not even yesterday, like 2, 3 years ago, right? That's the perfect world. But the world is not perfect, and people's understanding of the world, including Bitcoin, is not perfect. So there are people that want dollars. And I think that's a reasonable thing if they're, say, living in Venezuela or Argentina and their own currencies are hyperinflating. They're looking for something that is stable for them, not necessarily for us as Bitcoiners, but it's stable relative to their own local currency. And that's why they're looking for this dollar value. So I think until the world reaches a full understanding of Bitcoin, you'll still have people seeking out dollar value because it is better than what they have. And a lot of debts are also dollar denominated too. So suppliers go up the supply chain, people want dollars. So if you're doing business, you're a merchant or something, you have to pay and settle in dollars. And Bitcoin still is volatile, right? As it becomes the next reserve currency of the world, there will be ups and downs. So a lot of these people can't weather that volatility too. So even if they did understand Bitcoin, they cannot go all into Bitcoin. They might allocate something to Bitcoin, but they still want that dollar value because their debts are dollar denominated. So I think for us as a JAN3 and the developer of Aqua, we've kind of accepted that, and we understand that people want stablecoins. They want dollar value. So we put Tether front and center in the app alongside Bitcoin and Layer 2 Bitcoin so that they can transact. They can send Tether out to other chains, but they're holding liquid Tether on the liquid sidechain. So it's better in a number of ways. But you can still interact and interface with that entire digital dollar economy in your country, but you see Bitcoin there, you see the Bitcoin price, and you might think, okay, maybe I'll swap some into Bitcoin. And that's kind of the hope we have, that we tap into the 400, 500 million Tether users and get more of them into Bitcoin. And I think we're getting there. Some of our biggest markets for Aqua are Argentina and Brazil. So we know that we built something that has good product market fit, that meets their needs and gives them some benefits, because liquid Tether transactions are cheaper and private, actually. So you can hold it in liquid Tether and swap out to Tron and Polygon Tether when you need to pay someone that wants that, and you maintain your privacy. But overall, I think we're not going to see stablecoins disappear. We can hate on stablecoins, but I think that hate is sort of a first world perspective, because you probably have a bank account, right, Eric? You have a bank account?
Totally. Yes.
Yeah. So you're kind of speaking about this topic from a position of power and luxury, where a lot of people just don't have a bank account, but they
Yeah.
want dollars. So what do you do in that case, right? So I think stablecoins definitely serve an important market. And there have been criticisms too of, you mentioned it earlier, like stablecoins are a CBDC, but it's not really a CBDC definitionally, because it's not from the central bank, right? You still have that extra step. And I think the resistance towards the CBDC is that the central bank, which in a lot of cases is just an arm of the government, they can just shut you off because of political dissent, whereby as long as there is one step of separation, technically you're still protected by the law, and the full extent that the law couldn't protect you. And laws are still variable too and malleable, as we see in Canada, right? Like when we had the freedom convoy and the protests, the government just said, okay, everyone protesting the COVID vaccine is a terrorist now, and yeah, we can freeze your account. But at least they had to do that and take that step, and ultimately that cost them reputationally and credibility, in terms of credibility. But they had to take that step, and they had to force the banks, not the central bank, because central bank would just do it anyways. They don't need to do anything, right? They just pick up the phone and say, hey, cut off Eric, and then you're gone. But they have to take some step, enforce the Emergencies Act, the martial law, and then contact your bank and then deplatform you. So at least there's still that separation. And in this centralized world, I mean, that's probably the best protection you're going to get. You're never going to get a bulletproof bank account, right? It's still centralized, and that's why we have Bitcoin. But it is not definitionally a CBDC. The other thing I think people miss is that there is market demand for a stablecoin, and that market demand will be met. And the question is, who meets that demand? And I think we're very fortunate as Bitcoiners that you have a Bitcoiner, Paulo Arduino, that is, the CEO of Tether, and he is a Bitcoiner through and through. And Tether is accumulating Bitcoin, massive amounts of Bitcoin. They're investing in the Bitcoin ecosystem. They're bringing USDT to Lightning and to RGB potentially too. So they're doing a lot of interesting things for Bitcoin, and they are very much like advocating for Bitcoin. And the alternative would be somebody like Circle, that is the dominant stablecoin provider. And Jeremy doesn't like Bitcoin. He's said in the past, no one will use Bitcoin in 5 years. Like he said that 10 years ago or something like that. But it'd be like, I mean, Circle is basically Coinbase, right? So it's like Coinbase and Brian Armstrong with the dominant stablecoin, using that to promote Ethereum in some ways. But you can say you don't like it, but it will exist. There is market demand. So the question is, who is meeting that demand? And we're fortunate that Tether won out that race, and they're the dominant player now.
Yeah, that's very well put. Idealistically, I would love to see us get onto a Bitcoin standard and for the dollar to go away as quickly as possible, but that's not realistic. I like to think about it through the sense of, or the lens of like, you can't just flip off a light switch and turn the dollar off and turn a Bitcoin standard on. It would be absolute mayhem. So things like Tether and stablecoins, I see them in some ways providing like a smooth transition, especially if people can download a wallet like the one you've developed, use stable coins, and they're one click away from saving some of that into Bitcoin. So I think that that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
And you know
I
what
mean,
go ahead.
there's discussion about will it be a quick transition off the dollar or a slow transition. I think it's actually going to be a quick transition because fiat currencies always die in a spectacular manner. It's just a question of when. And you also have to factor in that the US dollar is in a very unique position because it is largely digitized outside of stablecoins. Like it is a digital thing. It's reached market penetration that no other prior reserve currency has reached, right? Like it's sort of married itself with technology and ingrained itself in economies around the world. So it might actually take a few years, maybe 5 years, maybe 10, I don't know, but it will end, but it's taking longer than normally it would have. That um, a non-digital fiat currency would not have this lifespan.
Is that because we can essentially offshore some of the debasement required to keep the dollar monetary system solvent?
Yeah, well, if you look at history, like all the reserve currencies in the past were relatively centralized because they weren't digital. But with the dollar being mostly digital, right, you've kind of permeated every other country's financial system in some way with it. And in some way, every single other fiat currency is now linked to the dollar, right? Everything is a derivative of the dollar. If you look at the Singapore dollar, right, it's linked to the US dollar. The Hong Kong dollar is also linked in some ways to the dollar itself, too. And then you have other countries that just use the dollar outright. So it's reached really high levels of permeation that we haven't seen in history before. So that's why I think it's managed to hang on this long, even with the astronomical amounts of money printing. But in the words of Lynn Alden, nothing stops this train. So it's just going to keep inflating. And it's just a question of when it hyperinflates.
Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. Onramp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. Onramp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-key vault guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control over your keys. Your funds are fully auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or be withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, Onramp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Schedule a consultation with the Onramp team to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove.
from time to time, I think that Bitcoin can help extend the life of the dollar. It can allow the inflation to get pretty hot and be kind of like an escape valve for that inflation. You know, if we woke up tomorrow and they doubled the money supply, we have some COVID 2.0. Over the next year, if housing goes up 100%, that's going to cause real problems. Homelessness will be a monumental issue, right? Rent control, all sorts of things would come from that. If we woke up tomorrow and Bitcoin's $10 million a coin, I don't know if that really causes any problems for anybody. So do you think that Bitcoin extends the life of the dollar? Is it an escape valve for the debasement required for the whole system to stay solvent? Or do you think it's going to bring the dollar to an end quicker?
I'm not really sure about that yet. I mean, I've heard the argument that stablecoins are extending the life of the dollar because it's helping effectively deliver the dollar to more people in the world. But I don't know. I still hold a lot of weight in the idea that fiat currencies fail spectacularly, and that's just because when people wake up, they all wake up. It's not like we'll start transitioning off the dollar, and the corner store near your house is gonna keep taking the dollar and changing their prices to like $1,000 for a Kit Kat bar, right? It's just going to be a quick thing once that thing hits, and they'll just switch off and take Bitcoin because they can't afford to not take Bitcoin. They can't afford to take the dollar at some point. And I think Germany with the mark dying, that's a good example. It happened in, a year-ish. And that was a non-digital thing. So I think it'll be faster for the dollar to fail. But
Uh,
until that happens, it does feel like Bitcoin is extending it by integrating with it in some ways.
Yeah, and I think about like blocks. You know, at some point, I would think it's logical to think that the large banking institutions in the United States are going to start loaning you money against your Bitcoin. They take possession of the Bitcoin. The system as a whole needs to debase its supreme collateral, and that kind of segues me into the thought of like reattaching to a hard money standard. I've kind of played this out in my head in some ways at times where it's like we were at a 1-to-1 peg to gold at some point, at least in theory, and we've completely detached. Is it possible for us to reattach to a Bitcoin standard for that to help slow down the debasement required to keep the system solvent? And at some point, you end up in a world where one sat is $1, and then you could just turn the dollar system off, and we have this smooth, beautiful transition.
I mean, it can be done, just like anything can be done, right? The only thing that can't be done is printing Bitcoin out of thin air, but anything else is possible. So I've talked about rebasing to Bitcoin and just setting a exchange rate of one sat to $1. And that just takes a politician, maybe it's Trump, I don't know, but somebody just to say, we'll let you redeem your debt for this. And that's it. I mean, how do you peg a dollar to gold? It's by decree. And pegging a currency to Bitcoin is the same. It just depends on the motivations and the necessity of doing so. I think when things get bad enough, every card is on the table, and we're seeing this, right? Some of those cards are bad cards. It's the rolling out of a CBDC like in Europe, or you know, starting to control the internet like in the UK. There are things that are happening, and you can see these things happening are a direct response to other things that they're trying to mitigate or distract you from. So there are a lot of, just take the UK as an example, there are a lot of societal problems. And now they're focusing on this one particular thing, which doesn't do anything for the other problems, but it definitely distracts and gets people enraged. But it just goes to show like every card is on the table now. But that rebasing the Bitcoin card is also, it's in the hands, and it can be played at any time. And that's why I say plan accordingly, because you have to be ready for when these things happen. And the best thing to do to be ready is to be in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I feel like we're in the midst of a galactic battle between good and evil, and it seems like the proverbial overlords are kind of accelerating an agenda, and at times I wonder if that acceleration is being driven by this immovable monetary instrument that we have
Well,
been blessed with.
if you look at all the warning signs, it is all there for anyone to see plain as day. There is infinite money now. Someone from the Federal Reserve said that in a clip before, but there's infinite money in the Federal Reserve, but it's true now, and you're seeing signs of that. If you look at the Bitcoin treasury companies like Strategy, they're borrowing at 0%, right? They're effectively tapping into the infinite money out there and converting it to Bitcoin. Even at a lower level, like you might not be Michael Saylor, but you can also tap into infinite money too. You can tap into like yield generating stocks, like ones that are anchored to MicroStrategy, right? If you can borrow at 5% or 7% and get back 120, 140%, that's infinite money right there, right? Even if you're discounting for capital gains tax, that's still infinite money. And the question is, when do people figure this out? And I think when people figure out this, that you could basically, invest, I don't know, $40,000 and start making back your annual salary free. I think a lot of money is going to flow to Bitcoin. Some of it will flow to other things like high time preference activities, but a lot of it will flow to Bitcoin once people figure out that there is infinite money out there and anybody can tap into it.
Yeah, and that would be through a product like MSTY.
Yeah, or IMST, right? And I think people don't really understand that. Like people are comparing those things to buying Bitcoin or buying MSTR and comparing the performance. But the way I view it is you should borrow and then pay the 5, 7% or whatever percent you can borrow at and buy that, right? Like if you borrowed money to buy Bitcoin or you borrowed money to buy Strategy, maybe you'll do well, but there's a chance that it'll stay flat too, right? There is a chance. But if at least with the dividend stocks, you can just that you're going to get some dividend. And the interesting thing too is that you don't even need to sit in a dividend stock. You don't need to sit in either of those two, like IMST or MSTY. You can just buy it before the ex-dividend date and then get rid of it when it comes back, because it usually does come back after the dividends are paid out. Because dividend stocks, they still dip after the dividend is paid because you're assuming that there's erosion. But I don't know. A lot of people don't understand it. Like these yield options are not paying you out of company earnings. They're actually harvesting the volatility by selling options. So they're also tied to the underlying in some way. Like they've synthetically constructed MSTR. So when MSTR goes up because Bitcoin goes up, it'll come back. So if you bought something at, I don't know, if it's IMST, it's like what, 50 something bucks? Like if MSTR rips and IMST dipped after a dividend payout, it will come back up and you can exit it. And if your timing is right, you can actually grab all of these dividends every month. So you don't need to just take one. You can take the IMST comes out first. You can take the IMST dividend if you can exit or exit at a loss less than your gain. You can then put your funds into MSTY and get that dividend too. But there are other dividend stocks too. You can basically harvest all these dividends. So there's a lot of free money out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard somebody break it down like that. Like I've implemented creative, very low risk forms of leverage in my life, like paying my auto loan the minimum payment as opposed to paying my vehicles off quicker, right? It's non-collateralized and I could stack sats. But I'm a rather conservative individual who's very risk adverse, which I find myself saying at times to people it's ironic for somebody who produced cannabis for 17 years and has a 100% allocation to Bitcoin. So I get concerned sometimes about the leverage and some of these treasury companies that are coming online. Like, I'm just a dude, a retired farmer. I'm not a TradFi specialist. So, when it comes to all these companies, I feel like it almost parallels the leverage traders that would blow up during downturns. Is there any parallel between are these new treasury companies like the leverage traders that could blow up just at another scale? Is that something that we should be concerned about? I mean, some of them have to blow up, I would assume.
It's hard to say. I mean, with the ETFs, I would say massive volatility is sort of gone from Bitcoin. Like, I don't think you'll see huge 80% drawdowns in the future because those are a symptom of a market that can move quickly, like trading on spot exchanges. But for a lot of these new entrants in there, they might be funds that bought IBIT or FBTC or BitB, but they're not going to dump quickly on some news. And a lot of people are putting it in their 401ks or their retirement accounts. They're not watching the market and saying, okay, we got to sell now. So I think you're going to see a lot more muted volatility. And that is good for leverage Bitcoin plays like a lot of treasury companies. But I still think there is some risk there because even without an 80% drawdown, you don't know if some of the smaller ones with CEOs that are not Bitcoiners, if they will weather a prolonged dip. And even if it's like a 20-30% drawdown, can they handle that? Are they strong enough to deal with the pressure from shareholders or the board if the board is not fully aligned? And would they sell? And would that push us down further? And I think it's a possibility. But at the same time, you have a very strong cohort of Bitcoin treasury companies with strong CEOs that have conviction, like Michael Saylor and like Adam Back. And Metaplanet seems quite strong too. So I think even if some of the smaller ones capitulated, the larger ones would simply just take all their Bitcoin, right? So it's a question mark if something happens. But I do think there is paper Bitcoin in the market right now. And it's probably some less reputable exchange that is doing something like FTX, because we know FTX sold Bitcoin that they didn't have. So I don't put it past some smaller exchange selling Bitcoin that they don't have. And that's probably one source of paper Bitcoin.
But you don't think that that's going to be any of the large ETFs or Coinbase? Because sometimes I get concerns about where we're at. It seems like you're going to be done manufacturing that Omega candle. I think about you all the time. I talk to some of my buddies. I'm like, when's Samson going to be done building this Omega, this God candle, and it's like, so I feel like the price is a lot lower than it should be. But then at the same time, I feel like there's the largest incentive there's ever been from the proverbial overlords, if you will, to suppress the price. If we had Brian Armstrong if he's the fall guy and goes down like Sam Bankman-Fried did, that could kick this can down the road a decade or more. That would cause huge problems. So I can't really make sense of whether or not I feel like there's major suppression or there's going to be some orchestrated event, or if we're just going to continue to tick up like we should. Is that crazy to be thinking? I get concerned. Do we have a big FTX times 10 moment?
Yeah, everyone's wondering like who could be the source of the paper Bitcoin. I don't think it's Coinbase. I mean, I dislike Brian as much as the next guy, but I don't think he wants to go to jail, so I don't think it's gonna be him. But you can't rule out anything. This is why it's important to hold your own Bitcoin, have your own keys, be sovereign. And in the light of all these potential blowups, that's your safety, right? Using Bitcoin as it was built originally. and not keeping it with someone else. If you want to invest in an ETF, if you want to invest in a treasury company, do so. But just know that you're taking on some risk. The zero risk thing is self-custody. And to each their own. Whatever you're comfortable with allocating, then do it. But just know that the safety is Bitcoin in your own hardware wallet.
Yeah, that's where you should put all of the money that you don't want to lose, as they say.
One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Knowing when to buy Bitcoin can feel complicated, and knowing how much to buy can be overwhelming, and getting started can be a headache, but it doesn't have to be. That's exactly why I recommend Coinbits, because it solves these major blockers and it's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. With Coinbits' Round Ups feature, you can automatically convert your spare change into Bitcoin while you shop. For example, when you buy a coffee for $3.50, the extra 50 cents is rounded up and it goes straight into Bitcoin. Here's why that's a huge win for you, because you don't have to be a tech wizard or try to time the market just right with Bitcoin. With Coinbits Roundups, you simply set it, shop, and stack sats. And you can set this up in under 2 minutes. Just visit the website, connect your card, and boom, you're buying a little Bitcoin every time you spend money. So stop wasting your time with complicated exchanges or confusing shitcoin apps. Coinbits simplifies your Bitcoin savings strategy. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove. Again, that's coinbits.app/breedlove.
I'm curious, Jack Dorsey and Jeff Booth have been making comments over the last 6 months to a year that they're concerned Bitcoin won't succeed if it doesn't quickly become a medium of exchange. I think Jack Dorsey was in an interview saying that he's concerned it would fade into irrelevancy.
I don't know. I think Jack is just engagement farming.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't really see that as a risk. Bitcoin is always going to be bearer money. And if you look at the global state of things, trust in institutions is not going up, it's going down. And when that is going down, people seek bearer assets. And, I think we might be blinded to that fact because ETFs are hoovering up more Bitcoin, treasury companies are hoovering up more Bitcoin. But at the same time, Bitcoin will continue to grow in value. And there are a lot of people holding their own Bitcoin still. So I don't see that as a risk because of necessity. People will need to transact Bitcoin because of necessity. It's not an ideological thing. Like we need to spend Bitcoin because if we don't spend Bitcoin, it's going to fail. It's a necessity thing. And if it wasn't a necessity thing, then Bitcoin would fail. Like if it depends on us to make people spend Bitcoin, then it's not going to work. Bitcoin works because the incentives work and because deep down people want bearer assets when things are shaky. And that's just a lesson that history has taught us over and over again. Right? Before it would be gold and silver or bills. Now it's going to be Bitcoin. It's just a question of when they understand that it is Bitcoin. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that inflection point.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think Bitcoin being the supreme store of value that can also be the medium of exchange. people are going to want to use Bitcoin as a savings technology, and then they're going to have the aha moment that, hey, wait a second, I'm in Miami, Florida, and I can pay a rancher in Colorado for beef by sending him Bitcoin directly. I've heard
Yeah.
Saylor talk to speak on that a bit over the years. And speaking of Saylor, I think he bought 20 some odd thousand coins earlier today. He has 628,791 coins at Strategy. And I made a video walking around my greenhouse talking about your quote about Max Payne, and you're concerned that Bitcoin price rips too much. And one of the things that you said in that, I think it was 10 bullet points or something along those lines, Saylor wouldn't be able to get to 1% of the supply, 210,000 coins. He is absolutely shredding. And so I'm shocked at times because he's open sourced the whole strategy. And being a Bitcoin maximalist, just, obsessed about what's happening, I'm watching all day long. It feels like it's so obvious and it's taking forever. It's like watching paint dry. In hindsight, you look back and you're like, wow, this is all happening really quickly. So I'm curious, do you think it's possible for any company to ever catch Michael Saylor? Like, I think he's on track to have the most valuable company in the world.
I mean, it seems impossible now. So, when I posted that, I thought he wouldn't get there, but he got there, and now he's almost at 3%. And this is why I think we've got to melt up, because there's no way that he can get to 3%, and we're still sitting at sub 0.2 M. So Omega is coming. Like, there's no way. There's no way. Like, okay, let me think about it this way. Like, can Sailor get to 5%? Like, and we're still at sub 0.2 M. There's 0% chance that happens, right? So we'll see. I think Saylor's got an excellent, well-oiled money machine powering his Bitcoin reactor, and he'll keep going. And there might be some that can catch up to him. We'll see, but no, not catch up, but like get closer to him. I think maybe one other company could do it, but for the bulk of it, I think everyone's going to aspire to be some fraction of strategy. Like maybe we'll aspire to be 1/5 of strategy. That's our goal, because he's just too far ahead to be caught up to.
Yeah, it seems like any attempt to catch him would push him further away. Like maybe Meta, maybe Berkshire Hathaway. I guess they got a couple $100 billion in cash, but like I don't think Berkshire Hathaway would make that purchase. I think Meta might be, Zuckerberg could be the one guy who could make a major buy. But even then, is he going to be able to buy 650,000 coins? I just don't think that's likely.
Well, if Warren Buffett wants, I'll join as CEO and I'll help him buy Bitcoin.
Yes, you would.
Offers on the table. It's good for 2 months.
Maybe somebody on the board is listening to the What Is Money show. They should reach out to you. What are your thoughts about Saylor? And so this got a lot of controversy and blowback a little bit. Mitch Hodel, I believe, asked him in Vegas about proof of reserves. Of course, the Bitcoin purist Maxis kind of went nuts, but his answer was effectively, he brought up liabilities. He said that he asked ChatGPT like what the risks are. There's all these risks. So you have, I believe, one of the ETFs, if I'm correct, has proof of reserves. El Salvador has proof of reserves. It seems to be like a sales pitch. Hey, we got proof of reserves. How much does that matter or not?
I mean, I think it doesn't matter as much for a public company. I mean, it's a nice touch, but at the end of the day, you really need to know what the liabilities are, right? You need proof of reserves and, proof of liabilities, but your liabilities could be dollar denominated and deeply entrenched in the financial system. So how do you audit that? There's no on-chain liabilities, right? You're going to depend on an auditor no matter what to get the full picture at the end of the day. So I think you have to be okay that, he doesn't post the reserves. I mean, he could, but it's not needed to get the full picture because this is a security. It is a stock. You're depending on a lot of TradFi systems and controls that it works. It's not Bitcoin. And I think, he hasn't identified all of the wallets, but people outside have. So, if you want, you can kind of look and see he's basically got all the coins, but at least he doesn't have to identify it himself, which in his view, I think I listened to clips of that. He was saying there's risks to that, right? Like, it could be targeted or whatnot. But if someone else analyzing, then, you can assume it's accurate, but only he knows for sure where all the coins are and with which custodian. So there is some mitigation on his view of security, I guess. So for me, it doesn't really matter because it is a stock. If I wanted proof of reserves, then I would want that from I don't know, an exchange. But even then, you don't know what the liabilities are, right? So I'll say it again, like the best thing is just to have your own Bitcoin. If you're worried about some entity, some company having reserves, it means you have some exposure there and you have some risk. And if you're not comfortable with that, then don't be in that and sit in cold stored Bitcoin and you have your own proof of reserves.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as you say that, it's kind of it clarifies the value in purchasing a SEC regulated stock and how buying strategy is significantly better than holding Bitcoin on an exchange because there is auditing, there's regulations they have to adhere to that some of these exchanges, especially the offshore exchanges, don't have to adhere to. So I'm curious, were you shocked when Trump signed the executive order for the SBR? Because I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe he did it so early in his term. And I went onto the website and there I am. It's like this moment. I could barely believe it's happening. I'm on like the whitehouse.gov and I'm reading it. It's like they can take the Bitcoin that they have, they're going to keep it. They can acquire more Bitcoin in a budget neutral way, and they can't sell it. But all other digital assets, they can sell them, and they're not going to acquire any more of them. I'm like, there's Samson's quote right there. All coins have natural sellers. Bitcoin has natural buyers. So were you surprised when he signed the SBR into effect?
Well, yes and no. I think for him, it was a low-hanging fruit that he could just do something and say promises made, promises kept, right? It didn't cost him anything. It was within his power to do so with executive order. And he paved the way for, non-budget neutral acquisition. And I think that's all powerful stuff. I think what is lacking now, and many Bitcoiners are seeing this, is execution on that front. Like, where is the audit of Fort Knox? Where is the tally of all the Bitcoin held by the government? And I think we're still waiting for that. And where is the next phase in the SBR? Like, when are you going to put up a website and accumulate? So I think we should all be holding them accountable, but we should also be fair in understanding that governments are not exactly the most efficient, well-oiled machines out there. So maybe they'll get to it. And I'm more of a glass half full kind of guy. So I think they'll get to it, but we'll see. But I'm hopeful that they do execute on the SPR. But to answer your question, I think it's kind of expected. It was low-hanging fruit enough that he could do that, get a PR win, and get his donors happy. And then the rest is up to, David Sachs and everyone else to execute on that.
Yeah, I'm also a glass half full kind of individual. I try not to spend time going down a doom loop mentally. It's just at the very least it doesn't feel as good as being optimistic.
Well, it's also a tool. So for JAN3, we like to work on nation state adoption. So we can go to other countries and say, hey, look at the SBR. And they're not going to ask, like, did they do anything? And we're not
Yeah.
going to tell them that, but we'll say, he did that. So why don't you do that too? And if you get enough people doing that, passing legislation, creating things like a framework for an SBR, eventually one of them is going to execute on that.
Yeah, is it possible that the United States government is acquiring Bitcoin quietly? Because you'd think there'd be an incentive to do so. If they announce a purchase, there's that Omega candle.
I don't think it's possible. It's hard for any government to do stuff in secret. Well, things that are beneficial for the country, it's hard for them to do it in secret. Other things, it's much easier. Like, you could do a lot of things in secret, but for something like Bitcoin, like an asset, it would be like saying, can you buy gold in secret? It's probably hard. You need to because it's part of the financial system and you have to be all above board, right? Like, where did you buy from? How is it custodied? There's a ton of questions that have to be answered. Like, it can't just be Trump directing someone in some agency to buy and send it to his Blockstream Jade wallet on his desk, right? There's got to be more controls and process in place for something like that. So I think it's really hard for a country to sneakily buy Bitcoin, even though they should. But I think it's hard. Just like it's hard for them to get to the point where they can't even buy, right? Like the city of Vancouver, Mayor Ken Sim has said that he wants the city to buy Bitcoin for its treasury, for its reserves. But he's said like there's 2 years of red tape he's got to go through to even get to that point. So, yeah, the answer is they could do it in theory, but in reality, they probably need to go through and cross the T's and dot the I's before they can really buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a strong suspicion that that's what they're doing. You know, if I look back, Jason Lowry writes his book, it gets pulled, he goes silent. You know, you got this group of people around Trump that are all pro Bitcoin. I have a buddy of mine who says that I give these powerful elites too much credit, but I like to think like, look, if an 80 IQ pleb farmer like me can figure this out, so can all of these powerful individuals.
So there's a very special place called the farm at Okefenokee. It's a 1,000 acre regenerative farm community about 45 minutes northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. The farm is a completely off-grid community. It has total food, water, and energy independence. Everything on the farm is 100% organic, and it even features wild boar and bear hunting. The farm at Okefenokee is right next to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, where you can do camping and canoeing tours. So if you're like me and you're interested in the self-sovereign lifestyle, then you can get your own lot on the farm at Okefenokee if you tell them that I sent you. Once you get a lot, you can build one of 3 custom cabin options. So if you value freedom, self-sovereignty, and living in touch with nature, then join me and my family. We have lot number 21, and we're going to be building a cabin there starting December 2025. To learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and make sure to tell them that I sent you. If you're a Bitcoiner, you need the Orange Pill app. It's where you can connect with other sovereign individuals locally and globally. It's great for when you travel, to meet local Bitcoiners, to go to Bitcoin meetups, and to find local merchants that accept sats. No distractions, no noise, just real Bitcoiners. So download the Orange Pill app today and find your local Bitcoin tribe.
That and then just it's this incentive vortex. Trump's talking about, you know, drill baby drill. If they're going to be drilling, they're going to be fracking. If you're going to be fracking, then you got to be mining. Do you think that it's logical to think that sooner than later that the United States government gets into Bitcoin mining, subsidizing it in some sort of way? I mean, what kind of involvement do you think that they could have in what time frame?
Well, if not the federal level, definitely at the state level. And you're already seeing a lot of that happening in Texas. But I've said this for, I don't know, 6, 7 years now. But eventually mining and energy generation is just the same thing. It's 2 sides of the same coin. So if you have a national utility, they're going to mine Bitcoin just because it makes sense to do so, even from a grid management perspective. The monetary upside is just icing on the cake. And as people understand what Bhutan did, mining Bitcoin and getting $1 billion in Bitcoin in their reserve, more people will do that. And that's something we're trying to do now at JAN3. We're trying to engage with governments to start small pilot projects. We found that this might be a better strategy than engaging at the very top and, meeting with the president or prime minister and trying to get him to do something, because it's really hard to get them to do something, not just not just at an intellectual level, but at an execution level too, for the reasons I said before. It's hard to do things in any government.
Yeah, that's why I was shocked when he signed the SBR, that executive order into effect. I was pretty surprised. I guess in hindsight, it's one of those things where how many people care? Like there's not a huge aversion to that. The way it was done was in a very palatable way, but I was definitely surprised it happened so quick. So I'm
Yeah.
also curious, the price is set at the margin. We have, I believe, somewhere around 2 million coins are on exchanges. Is there any way to know out of those 2 million coins, and is that accurate? Is that an inaccurate number?
I mean, it's an estimate,
It's an
and
estimate.
I
So
think it's a
if
fair estimate.
it is that include coins that people hold, oh, like they technically own, like, customers who haven't taken self-custody of their Bitcoin. So that 2 million is technically not all for sale.
Yeah, it's not all for sale. I think it's definitely it's a mix of exchange-owned coins and also holdings from people on exchanges. A lot of people have, or a lot of hedge funds and I guess trading firms keep funds on exchanges for, liquidity provisioning and trading.
And would those estimates, that 2 million coin estimate, include any of the ETF coins or strategies coins?
I don't think so. I think those would be with custodians.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So if that's the case, in order for us to rip to 1M, do you know what kind of tsunami of capital would need to come in during what kind of duration of time? Because I feel like there's a lot of capital that could come into Bitcoin pretty quickly. Do you have any estimates around that?
Hard to say. I think we should have been here already. So
Yeah.
I would have thought that the ETFs opening the floodgates combined with strategy would have gotten us there already. And this is why I'm one of the believers that there is paper Bitcoin out there dampening the market. So we'll see. But, nothing stops the train. It's going to go. The dollar is going to keep on inflating and Bitcoin is going to keep going up. It's just a question of when it all converges.
Yeah, and so if there's paper Bitcoin and that becomes and that gets exposed, would that cause a crash or would that cause the price to rip? I've never really thought about that.
Hard to say. Depends on what the market thinks of it at the end of the day. But I think like the 80,000 coins that were market sold is a good indicator that the market doesn't care about anything now. Like there's just too much power behind accumulation, whether it's strategy or other Bitcoin treasury companies or hodlers or ETF buyers too. There's just a massive amount of insatiable demand, and the demand is only going to go up.
Yeah. Do you have any idea who on earth would sell 80,000 coins? That doesn't make sense to me. I think like, okay, so somebody, let's say it was an OG whale that was buying for pennies or a couple dollars a coin to get to this point and to maintain possession of 80,000 coins. They have to have a level of conviction where they didn't just sell 80,000 coins so they could go buy 42, trophy real estate properties and a bunch of SMP. Like, who would sell 80,000 coins? Is that a nation state?
No, it might be an early holder. I mean, there have been rumors that it's some estate sale, but nobody knows for sure.
Yeah, because what is that? That's $8 billion. Yeah, I think that's $8 billion. Maybe that an estate sale that would make sense. But it was incredible how quickly the market just gobbled all those coins up.
Yeah. Bitcoin didn't care. It just subsumed all of it.
Yeah, and so based upon that, and you've kind of already, I mean, quite literally said this, you don't think that we're in for another 80% pullback. You think those days are likely to be behind us?
Nothing is impossible, but it does not seem likely with the current state of things.
Yeah, what Robert always says when I ask him questions like that is the only thing to expect from Bitcoin is the unexpected.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how possible is it? It has to be somewhat possible for coordinated effort by nation states, large corporations to sell paper Bitcoin, to suppress the price, to benefit themselves. Is that, do you think that that's something that is likely to be happening, kind of happening, unlikely?
I think it's unlikely. I think it's probably someone or something less reputable that it would be doing something like that.
Saylor's price prediction, 21 years from now, a $21 million coin. That's 80 some odd $1,000 a month on average in price appreciation.
Yeah.
Is
That's
that absolutely crazy for you to wrap your mind around? Or you think that that's possible?
No, I think it's fully possible. I mean, that's like an Omega candle every month or so. And that's in line with my prediction that we're going to go to 1 million fast. See, even Saylor thinks so. Like it's going to be fast and violent, no matter how you slice and dice it, right? If you say his prediction, if you take his prediction in the least violent way, that is like 10 Omega candles a year, right? And that's 1 million in a year. That is the least violent thing. Anything else is utter unspeakable financial market violence. Like that's like, $1 million candle in a year or a $2 million candle in 2 years, and then rapid ascension upwards. And that's all in line with Max Payne theory. So I agree.
Yeah.
Like that what he just quantified it in numbers 21, 21, 21, but I've quantified it in words with Omega candles and Max Payne theory. But it's the same packaged differently.
Yeah, I love that. So do you have any final words of wisdom for Bitcoiners who might be experiencing this violent upheaval into a new echelon of living? I mean, this is going to get pretty crazy.
Plan accordingly.
Yeah. Yes, I think about it often, as the price increases, optionality increases, power increases, and with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. Like treat your Bitcoin as if it was 10 times more valuable or 100 times more valuable than it is. Secure it, make sure that you're trying to stay as private as you can. Use the privacy tools afforded to you. Um, yeah, just plan as if your holdings are 100 times more valuable, and then you'll be in a good place.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. That's well said. Well, Samson, it's been an honor to chat with you. Thank you for your time and everything that you've done for Bitcoin. I can say personally, I'm very grateful, and I think most of the people in the world who know what you've been doing feel the same way.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. It's been a blast.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.